Today's sugya in Yoma Daf Lamed Zayin fascinates me. It interests me because of a concept called kavod. But kavod meaning for any of the three bearers, if I can call them that, of the ksarim, of the special crowns. Klal Yisrael were crowned with three unique crowns, three unique kedushas. One is the kedusha of the melech. Som tosim alecha melech. You have to have tremendous awe and kavod for the melech. Shaul was taken to task earlier in Masechet Yoma for the fact that he was mochel on his kavod. A melech shemoch al kvodo ein kvodo mochel. The awe, som tosim alecha melech shetei mas alech, means that there's no reason for and no leniency in terms of, oh, the melech is my buddy. I may have gone to school with the melech. He's a childhood classmate of mine, but it's irrelevant. Then we have another kesser. That's the kesser we're going to deal with today, and that's called kesser kahuna. And finally, the third kesser, the third sanctity, is kesser Torah. And what we want to see today is the perhaps analogy to make a comparison between kavod of kahuna and kavod of Torah. That's very interesting. Who would put any emphasis on the protocol of what I call processional marches? Again, if you're British, my question doesn't begin. If you've seen the changing of the guard at the Buckingham Palace, you know what pomp and ceremony is all about. Everything is meticulous. Where does the Torah find, again, before Buckingham Palace by a good couple of centuries, find an emphasis on the procession itself? Who walks first? Who walks second? Who is on the right? Who is on the left? Who goes forward and who goes backwards? It's in the context of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. So we are now on Daf Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph, and we're about, shall I say, a little bit more than halfway down from the top of the Amud. And if you see the wides get longer, count 4 lines down from the beginning of the wide lines, and the Mishnah is quoted, Baskan miyamino v'rosh av beis av mismo. The Kohen Gadol is on the verge of one of the most important, if not the most important aspects of his responsibility and avodah of Yom Kippur, and that's the Hagrola. He's got 2 goats, they're identical, and now he has to, through lottery, decide which one is Hashem, which one is Azazel, and he's accompanied by 2 attendants, if you can call them that, one on his right and one on his left. Who's on the right? The Skan Kohen Gadol. Let's understand that the Skan Kohen Gadol is basically in the on-deck circle, if I could use a baseball terminology. He's the second string. He is the pitcher in the bullpen and is exercising his pitching arm. Because in event that the Kohen Gadol becomes disqualified, either because he doesn't have a wife or he becomes Tomei, he's a Malkeri. We did all the precautions that we could, but it didn't work. And even Reb Shimon Bar Yochai couldn't help us. He's replaced by the Skan Kohen Gadol. He is therefore the Skan Kohen Gadol on the right of the Kohen Gadol. we'll see exactly how he helps the Kohen Gadol in the role in the process of the water. To the left is the Rosh Beis Av. He is the representative of the Kohanim who are on duty on that day, because as you know, the entire year, the calendar year, is divided amongst 24 mishmaros. Each mishmeres is subdivided to 6 batei av. Each mishmeres gets a week in the first half of the year and another week in the second half of the year. The Beis Av is in charge of the avoda for that day. There's not that much that they do on Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is almost a day off for the Beis Av, because all the avoda on Yom Kippur has to be implemented by the Kohen Gadol. However, there's one individual who's called the Rosh Beis Av, who is accepted to be perhaps the greatest scholar amongst those Kohanim who are serving on that day, and he will join the Kohen Gadol on the left side. Rabbi Yehuda, let's begin to compare and contrast Keser Kahuna with Keser Torah. Hamahalech liyamin rabo harei zeh bur. You know, there was once a Rosh Yeshiva who came to give a guest shir in the yeshiva in Slobodka. He was a Telzer Rosh Yeshiva. And everybody knew that you don't ask a kasha in the middle of this guest shir in front of the whole yeshiva in Slobodka to the Rosh Yeshiva of the yeshiva in Telz unless you're ready to get smashed. That was the style. Against a whole different style today. You know, today you call it abuse, you know, but that's the way they did it in those days. So the Talmidim had a machlokes, which is the worst thing that this Rosh Yeshiva could say to you, which is the lowest insult that he could give you. And they were declaring between two possibilities. One word was called a shegitz, and the other was an amoritz. Now, you and I would say it's worse to be called a shegitz than an amoritz. Because an amoritz is ignorant, maybe he's a little dull, he's dumb, but at least he's Jewish. A shegitz is a guy. So they were debating which of these two insults are worse. And they only found out at the end of the shir, when two different students during the course of the shir raised the question. And one of them, the Rosh Yeshiva, Reb Blazer, he called him an amoritz du bist. And the other one, he said to him, du bist a shegitz. And over lunch, the Talmidim realized that the question that was asked by the first Talmud, who was called a shegitz, was not such a difficult question. It was easy to answer that question. But the good question was asked by the Talmud, who was called an amoritz. And because he challenged the Rosh Yeshiva with a great question, the Rosh Yeshiva had to smash him with the worst smash possible. So he had to call him an amoritz. And we see from this that amoritz, an ignorant person, is worse than a shegitz. And that's why Rabbi Yehuda says that a person who rubs shoulders with a Rebbe of his, and he stands there on the right side, as if to say, you know, I'm great, I deserve to be immediately on the right side of my Rebbe. Harei zeh bur, he's an amoritz. That's the worst he could call a person, amoritz. Technically, bur comes from the word bar, which means an empty ditch. He's empty inside. He doesn't know beans about derech eretz for a Rebbe. And the Torah says, Es Hashem Elokeichem Tira, and the extra word Es is L'Rabos Talmidei Chachamim, and we have to have a Mora for a Talmid Chacham. Now that's just the Talmid Chacham. If he's your Rebbe, that's a much higher level of cover that you have to have. And obviously, this person has no derech eretz. He doesn't know what respect he has to give his Rebbe. Isn't that against our mission? Back to Gemara Tnan, the Mishnah says, "Skan b'yamino." The skan is rubbing shoulders, so to speak, figuratively, on the right side of the Kohen Gadol. Rosh Beis Av is smaller. Skan is not on the level of Keser Kahuna, of that of the Kohen Gadol. Has to have a tremendous awe for the Kohen Gadol, especially on Yom Kippurim. That's the Kohen Gadol's day. Yet the Mishnah has it that he stands immediately to his right. Furthermore, V'yod Tanya, we have a brisa. If there are three people who are walking together, one of them is a Rebbe, they're not going to walk single file. They're going to walk abreast one of the other. Harav ba'emtza. And now we look at the two Talmidim. One is more experienced, more scholarly. He's in a higher class, some higher level. He's on the right side. Gadol b'yamino, Katan small. But you see that a Talmud is immediately to the right of his Rebbe, just like the Skan Kohen Gadol is immediately right to the Kohen Gadol. So why do you tell me that I'm a Halech b'yamino harezeh bur? V'chein motzinu. This is a brisa in Masechet Derech Eretz. Shlosha malach esher shebo eitz Avram, Michael b'emtza, Gavriel b'yamino, uRafael b'smolo. They came and encountered Avram Avinu standing abreast. Michael was in the middle. Michael is considered the greatest of all malachim. Then we have two other malachim, Gavriel and Raphael. Who's greater? So the Brisa Masechet Derech Eretz tells us that below Michal, above Raphael, comes Gavriel. And last is Raphael. Very difficult. Which one of the malachim had the primary purpose and goal of visiting Avram Avinu, if not Raphael? Avram Avinu was on the third day after a very sensitive, delicate operation. The pasuk here says, "Vayisa einav, vayar v'nei shlosha nashim nitzavim alav." How do you see three people? Weren't they in single file? The answer is they were abreast. Now, if Michael is the kingpin here, how could they stand abreast? How could Gavriel stand on his right and fall on his left? You told me, Rabbi Yehuda, that Amahalach b'yamin Rabo harezeh bur. So the Gemara says that we have to reinterpret the statement of Rabbi Yehuda. Arguma means to interpret. Rav Shmuel bar Papa Kamei de Rav Adi Adam Hideshi is Kasebo Rab. So again, the question here is the following: should a Talmud flank his Rebbe on the right? It all depends. All those sources from our Mishnah and the Brisa in Derech Eretz that indicate that the Talmud should walk shoulder to shoulder, so to speak, to his Rebbe on the right. That means Hideshis Kasabo Rab. What I would suggest is the following. The perspective here is that of those who are watching from behind as the three, the Rebbe with his two Talmidim, right and left, are walking by. So we're not looking from the perspective of the goal of the location X where they arrive, but rather from location Y from which they depart. The Talmidim should, so to speak, cover up their Rebbe. The Rebbe is like enveloped by his Talmid. He's got a Talmud on his right behind him and a Talmud on his left behind him. For the Talmud to walk shoulder to his Rebbe would not be covered. But if you have two other Talmidim, and the goal is to envelop the Rebbe, like Moshe Rabbeinu was enveloped by the Anad, then one Talmud is on the right, the other is on the left. The more chashuv Talmud will be on the right, because the right is always the more chashuv, but he's behind the Rebbe. Kadeshi is kasabo Rab. Umasha shoninu shatalmid sorech leleches liyamin Rabbo. Hainu kadeshi is kasabo Rabbo sheyelchu me'achorei harav v'yichasu. They're behind the Rebbe and they're covering him. That would fit under the category of Rabbi Yehuda's description as a boor, but rather me'achorei haRebbe. Tzarech hagadol shebetalmidim shel yelech liyamin Rabbo, but me'achorav hakotan shebetalmidim lismolo me'achorei harav. U'shnei me'achorei harav. Nimtza al yidei kach mechusa harav me'achorav al yidein. He's covered. Masha Omar Rabbi Yehuda shaholech liyamin Rabbo arizabur hainu shaholech liyamin Rabbo b'tzido. The Gemara is now in the name of Rabbi Shmuel differentiating between tzido and achorav. Achorav is not only a permissible, but it's even recommended and even required. When a person wants to get an image of his Rebbe, he goes behind his Rebbe to try to see what he can see, and yet the Rebbe is concealed. As the pasuk say, "Upanai lo yiro." Hashem says, "I'll go beyond you, Moshe Rabbeinu, and take a look me'achorav." Chazal interpret as the kesher shel tefillin. It's me'achorav. You are behind him. And that's what it means to cover up the Rebbe. Mar is not happy with it. So Asanya, the Brisa says, "Amahalik neged Rabbo, hareza bur, and achore Rabbo, hareza migase haruach." If he's going in front of his Rebbe, that's ignorance. If he goes behind his Rebbe, that's gaiva. That's against Reb Shmuel Bar Papa. We said that our Mishnah and the Brisa, we're talking about a Talmud that goes behind his Rebbe. And now we're saying that this Brisa says if you walk behind your Rebbe, that shows gaiva. So the Gemara answers that what Rav Shmuel Bar Papa had in mind when he said that the Talmud has to go behind his Rebbe, That's the mitzaded atzdudeh. He shouldn't be immediately on the right of his Rebbe, behind his Rebbe, because in such a case he's a boor. He shouldn't be immediately behind his Rebbe, because that would make him into a gas ruach. But rather he should be a little bit behind his Rebbe and a little bit to the side of his Rebbe. And therefore he's partially covering over his Rebbe, but he's not totally behind his Rebbe. And there are three different laws over here. Rabosai, as I said at the outset, you can't believe how meticulous the Torah is, halacha is, with regard to this concept of covered for Keser, Keser Torah, Keser Malchus, and Keser Kun. What are the three dinim? If he walks in front of his Rebbe on the right, he's a boor. If he walks directly behind his Rebbe, he is a gas ruach. He should walk behind his Rebbe, but not directly behind his Rebbe, on the tzad, on the side of his Rebbe. The Kalfi Hoisa Sham Ubashne Gorolos. We learned in the Brisa. V'nosan Aaron al Shnei Aseirim Gorolos. Gorolos shel kol davar. It matters not what material you use to create these gorolos. Yochol yitein shnayim al zeh u'shnayim al zeh. Perhaps Aaron should put on each one of the Shnei Aseirim gorolos, because the Torah says Shnei Aseirim gorolos. Maybe gorolos is referring to Shnei Aseirim. Each one of the Seirim needs two gorolos. That means there'll be one gorol that says Lashem, and the other goat will have two gorolos, one of which will say Lazazil, and the other will say Lashem. Shnei gorolos shekosv aleim Lashem al hasoyer ha'echad. Ushnei gorolos shekosv aleim Lazazel al hasoyer ha'shem. I will have to go over this tomorrow because we're precious for time. But Talmud Lomar, Gorol echad Lashem, Gorol echad Lazazel. So the Lashon Yachid here of Gorol means one Gorol Hashem, one Gorol Lazazel. She'ein kan Lashem el Gorol echad, ein kan Lazazel elo echad. So B'li Neder tomorrow we'll try to go over the Havamina here of Shnei Gorolos shel kol davar. Okay then, so let me wish you a great day. Thank you so much.